Okay, so it is recording. Afterwards, I will send it to you, Heidi, through a Google link so that you guys can access it. I'm actually going to pull up a little PowerPoint based on the feedback that all of you had provided based on the survey, and we'll go through it. Just stop as you have questions. Okay, let me go back to the very beginning. Okay, so this is just kind of, oops, that's not it. Sorry, I opened the wrong one. Let me open the right one since I was working on different things. Okay, so we're just going to kind of go through it this way so I can still see everything. Sorry, I am just not with it this morning. Okay, let's start here. We're going to do kind of like a circle. We're going to start with an agenda of greetings and feeling check-in, a follow-up, and then talk about restorative practices, a way to check in with your students, and then some virtual circles. So I know we've got everybody here, but I want to do this as like we would with a circle. So I'm going to open up the chat box, and if you will type in the chat box your name, your title, position, and what's one thing you miss during social distancing. So again, I'm Stephanie Martinez. I work at USF in Tampa, and I think the thing I miss about social distancing the most is seeing different people. I see the same 3 people day in, day out. Okay, Nicole, she's 2nd grade teacher. I miss all of her kids with the warm hugs and smiles. I have to say, Nicole, the other thing I do miss is that I was volunteering in a 1st grade class doing sight words weekly with the students, and I won't get to say goodbye to them. And that's kind of sad because I've spent all year with them. Helen, not being able to travel to see her kids. It's probably got to be hard too. Stephanie, again from SST8, being able to walk down the hall and brainstorm with colleagues informally and on the spot instead of having to schedule calls and meetings virtually. And Janine says, misses connecting with colleagues and visiting out-of-state friends. Heidi, I miss my variety in my day and seeing my colleagues. Dee Dee, I miss hugging and missing my kids in Virginia. Laura, I miss the relationship, students and staff. Stacy, the smiles and eye contact when in a store. Yeah, that's hard too. Okay, so we got everybody did a little check-in. So what we're gonna do next, I'll go back and share this because I wanted to be able to see your chat box. We're gonna do a feelings check-in. So it's a Monday morning. I just wanna do real quickly, roses or thorns. So if you'll just type in the chat box, rose or thorn. So I've got a bunch of roses this morning. I've got a combination of both. I'm kind of like that, Dee Dee. I'm kind of both this morning. Michelle's kind of both. Okay, would anyone like to share why they are a rose or both? I think that's what we heard the majority of. I will say I'm a both this morning. I haven't had any coffee, and I'm still kind of trying to figure out the day. Heidi said the sun is shining. That's a great reason for a rose. The sunshine's definitely helping. Janine agrees with that.
I could jump in as well.
Okay.
I have 2 little ones in the house, 1-year-old and 3-year-old, that don't really understand how sustained attention on task, and also that mommy, who has been attached to them for now 34 days, but who's counting, has to lock herself in an office instead of being with them. So I just went to go get coffee between our calls this morning, and there's a red dump truck outside the breakfast window downstairs our dining room. And so everybody is happy, and my husband is home today from work. So I feel like I know it's small win, but I'm upstairs and they are quiet and they are happy, and I have hot coffee today. So I feel focused more so than I have been able to. So it's a good start.
Good. I see a couple other things. Laura being home with her own 2 kids is nice. And Nicole arose because it's going to be warm, which I think is a general consensus for most of you, and that she gets to see her students and she finished an hour workout. That's a whole lot to do before we start. Okay. Yeah, hooray for the red dump truck. That really does help when you have something that is interesting and entertaining that's a little different when you've been stuck inside for so long. Okay, so we're going to go back and flip through. Okay, so I want to do a little bit of a review and an activity follow-up from the training. So when we did the training, we talked about effective statements. Some of those are the I statements that we use for teaching empathy to our students and to our staff, and using those emotional feelings, which I have to show you. We've been doing this at home. I don't know if you can't see it. I'll show you guys in a little bit, but I have the how do you feeling today sitting on my desk. My son and I are sharing a shared workspace, and so he has his, I have mine. And talking about why you're feeling the way you do. Then we went into circles, and where there's 3 types. There's the community building, which we'll talk a little bit about circles that you can do online with your students, and I would really emphasize the community building right now more than anything, because of a lot of already what you guys have said is that it's a little bit different. We're at home, it's a different structure, we're missing people, and I think that's what our students and we may be needing is that community building piece. Using circles for teaching and then problem solving. So hopefully the way we're doing a circle today is a little bit different, but we'll talk about some different ways to do that. Those chats, so when there has been something that has been done where some harm was happened, then having a chat to do that. Then we talked about those formal conferences. So that's more of those definite reactionary practices where there's been a harm and then putting that into place. And then reintegration. So when a student is gone out of class for whatever reason, whether it's the office, out of school suspension, in school suspension for older kids, maybe alternative placements or juvenile justice programs, and they come back to our school, setting up a plan in place to get them going. So what I want to ask you now is on 1 to 5 in the chat box, let me know what one you have seen working, whether it's a school you work in or a school you work with, and let me know which one you guys have seen, what is working, and what questions do you still have. I'm gonna stop sharing. So, oops, maybe let me put that back up for 1 second so you can see the numbers again. And then I wanna be able to see the chat box. So again, 1 is effective statements, 2 is circles, 3 is chats, 4 is conferences, and 5 is reintegration. So what's working? What questions do you still have? Okay, so Heidi said she's seen circles in the classroom as a tier 1 strategy used to teach expectations and rules. Okay, good. Stephanie, I've seen circles using effective statements in circles. Great. Laura shares that circles are working in her classroom. She'd also started to talk about effective statements. I know that reintegration was happening through our school resource officer. Wow, that's a lot going on. Very impressive. What are some questions or concerns or resources that people are looking for? Nicole says, we've been working very hard in my building to support the teachers. They're teaching effective statements in circles. The teachers are doing an awesome job with it, and students are using effective statements regularly. Stephanie, so she brought up a good question. So that's a good one. And she was wondering if reintegration concepts and your meeting planning forms would be beneficial for schools when buildings reopen. I'm wondering more if we wanted to do it think about it as a tiered process. So what I'm thinking, Stephanie, is when we come back into school, really starting with community building circles for students, and really emphasizing that community building circles. I would say not only just for students, but also staff probably need that too, because I know a lot of you said that's one of the big things you've been missing is your colleagues and seeing your kids and being able to brainstorm and the smiles of others. But then I'm wondering if for some of our students who are really struggling, maybe some of our students who, as Heidi said earlier, haven't had really access to us during this time because they don't have technology, they don't have internet, and they've really had those gaps. They haven't had that connection. Maybe doing a reintegration plan for those individual students, doing it like a tiered approach, but maybe even just thinking of a school-wide reintegration plan. So what can we do as a school to build those circles into place to reintegrating students? Um, Thoughts on that one? I'm just thinking a reintegration plan for each individual student would be really hard, but if you can really identify the students who maybe will struggle with coming back, that might be a way to do some of that reintegration. And I'm going to share with you guys in a second one district how they're doing check-ins with kids, and that would be another data source to let you know students that may struggle and may need some of those reintegration. Yeah, Helen B, I would say school-wide for everybody. I mean, I think even some families may need it. I know several of you are parents too, and you're working at home and you have your kids. And I know that there have been some probably bumps and hurdles with online learning. And I know that on our end here in Florida, we've had some frustration between teachers and parents with the online learning. So maybe even doing it that way to build some of those relationships back where maybe there's been some tension during this time. That was a great question. Anybody else have another question about when you go back and trying to put these practices in place? Take it that we're good. So what I want to go into now is a couple different things. So I mentioned that I have a school district that's really doing what they call check-ins with their kids. And so they're not only just checking in with their students, but they're also checking in with their staff. So a couple things that have come up with that is that doing it at least weekly would be helpful. One of the schools was doing it every day, and they said after doing that for a week, they thought it was a little bit too much. They are going to do it at least weekly. Most of the schools in the district are going to do it bi-weekly. So the way their district is set up, they have online learning Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They're not doing anything on Fridays. So they decided that they're going to check in on Mondays since the kids have had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off to see how they're going. But then they decided to check in on Wednesdays too, because they want to make sure if the kids need anything before the weekend, they can address it Thursday before they go to the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So they do check-in Mondays and they do check-in Wednesdays. It can be done a variety of ways. The big thing was making it age appropriate. So they've decided for the younger students that they might pair images with words, so emojis with words for the younger students, whereas for the older students, they're going to ask them very specific questions. And I'll show you some of the questions in a second that they're coming up with. The big thing is finding out how students and staff are feeling, and also not just feeling, but if there's any specific needs. So technology needs, I don't know about you, but here there's a lot of concerns about food and having food for our kids. So those type of needs as well. The other thing is planning on who will do the checking in. So two of the schools we've talked to, it's the teacher that's going to be doing the checking in. And so they're really having to make a concerted effort with our middle schools and high schools that it's one teacher. They had it at one point where every single teacher was checking in. And again, the kids were like, this is, my math teacher just asked, why am I doing this again? So they were having to decide who was doing that, but also who was going to be the person that checked in with staff. And so they've taken the administrators where they are doing weekly check-ins with the staff as well. So each administrator has a couple staff they're assigned to, so they're checking in with them because I think our staff need that as much as well as the students. Once they do the check-in, having some sort of referral or process for identifying a student her staff is in need and how that will look like. So if I'm a second grade teacher and I check in with Johnny and I'm concerned about his welfare or I'm concerned about him, do I follow up or is there someone else that needs to follow up? And so they've decided that a lot of that follow-up will either be administration, school counselors, or social worker, depending upon what the request is. So they have a little referral form, they call it the audit, and it's something that any teacher can fill out. So they identify who will follow up. So Heidi mentioned receive phone calls about kids in foster care. Yeah, and that's a definite concern too. So making sure that your social workers involved has been very helpful. And Heidi, age appropriate. Yep. So here's an example, a couple of examples of what they're doing. So it's really kind of hard to see, but on the left-hand side, there is an image and it's a Google form. So to make it easy, when the students log in, they have this Google form, they put today's date, they put their name, and then there's a question, how are you feeling today? Make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. You move your pretty pictures out of the way. Okay, so let's make it bigger so you can kind of see. So you can kind of see. Today's date, select your teacher's name, your name, how are you feeling today? And so they had some couple words. They also had an other, so they could put in something else. And why do you believe you're feeling this way? And it was open-ended. What that does is this Google goes into a Google form. It goes into an Excel spreadsheet. So over time, they can kind of assess how students are doing. So if we have a student who is, say, sad on Monday and sad on Wednesday, then sad the following Monday, that might be a student who has some additional concerns. And so who is looking at this? At this specific school, their administrative concerns are doing that. Heidi asked, are the concerns about privacy checking in this way? They have it on their district platform where the students check in. So it's the district platform and then it goes to their Google Forms and it's locked. So there's a feature where it's locked so only administration have access to it. Their district was okay with it that way. So I think that might be some district concerns that a district would have to identify if they're okay with that. But because it was locked and it has a password and it's only accessible by a couple people, they were okay with it. So that was how one school is doing it. Now, I do know that a couple of the middle schools and high schools where they have students who are not regularly checking in, so they haven't logged in after a certain amount of time into their system, then they do a personal call with the students. Now, they can't necessarily access anyone, but they are trying. So they're doing calls and phone calls, and they say they get the majority of the students, but if they can't, they just keep on trying to do it. Okay, so Janine has some suggestions there. Thank you. Okay, so then on this other side, these are some of the questions. They're calling it a mental health temperature check. There's some guidelines in there of 2 to 4 questions max. And so you can see some of the questions that they're asking there. Of course, you know, they're making it age appropriate. These are just some sentence stems for them to think about and start with, and then they can modify it as well. So this is what their district team has given to their schools to kind of help them generate some questions. And they decided that they wanted the schools to rotate between them. Then here it says emergency learning core support for students, the temperature checks, going over the student expectations. So they have asked every school to align their school-wide expectations for PBIS to online learning. They've given them some suggestions as well. They're doing some daily SEL lessons. The school counselors are doing class modules and lessons for that as well. And then some of the other things that they're doing is their social workers are doing a support group for teachers. So it's anonymous, it's once a week, they email the lead social worker and she's doing that virtually for them, where if they need some support, they can do that as well. And then they do some just anonymous check-ins, they do those phone calls. So you can see they're trying to check in with everybody to see how things are going. Has anybody seen anything similar to this with their schools? No?
The only thing I think we've seen, Stephanie, is some schools are assigning connectors as people as connectors, and those people are checking in. I don't know if they have systems like you see here with the and things, but there are schools, I know several school districts, there are people that are they're assigned as a connector, and if kids aren't logging in or aren't making contact, they're supposed to be making contact with those kids and families. I don't know if it's to this level of sophistication, but I know they're thinking, a lot of our schools are thinking in the way of at least how do we connect with those kids and those families so that everything's okay. And that's all I've seen, and I don't know if anybody else could add to that.
Yeah. And I think of this as like a restorative practices because it's still part of that circle. This is that checking in piece. And we're really honing on their emotions and checking in with them and making sure they're getting the supports that they need. So that's one thing to think about within restorative practices. Now, the other one is doing what we call virtual circles. So kind of like what we did here today, we started with a greeting, asked people to say their name, say where they were from, and one thing they missed about during social distancing. That could be a great thing to do with everybody because everybody's missing some different things. So if you're going to do virtual circles, there's a couple things to be considered. Chat boxes are a great way to do it because everybody can put their feelings and thoughts in, and whoever's monitoring it can see what's being said. They can follow up. If you're trying to do a large group of students, you know, the mute and unmute can be difficult. But one of the things that I've seen done, if you want everybody to talk and share instead of just using the chat boxes, is if you've got the people like in Zoom where you see the pictures, you kind of pass down. So for example, at the top, I have, let me get to the very top, is me. Then I have Heidi underneath me, and then Stephanie. So I would start and I would share. I'm Stephanie. I'm from USF PBIS project. The thing I miss about social distancing the most is seeing other people. And I say, Heidi, do you want to go? And then we would pass it to Heidi. And then Heidi would see who is underneath her on the screen. Not sure if Zoom has it the same order, but my next person would be Stephanie. As the facilitator, I would have my list of names in front of me and check off and then make sure everybody gets a turn. Everybody could pass if they still wanted to pass as well. So just couple different ways of doing it. I know that, you know, when we get our students on board, maybe a little bit different and difficult to do that way, depending on kind of the age of the students. The other limitation by doing the talking feature is the fact that some of our students may have the video feature, they may have the audio feature, but they may not have a microphone. So if we're doing something that requires speaking, just making sure that everybody does have the microphone. The other consideration too is the location of where our students will be. Some of our students are in homes with multiple parents, multiple kids, and they may not be comfortable talking. They may feel more comfortable typing in the chat box and being honest and sharing that way. I know we've also had some concerns with background noise. One of my coworkers, her daughter teaches, and the parents got into a fight in the background while the kid was online. So those are some other considerations. So maybe, you know, just using the chat box depending upon what's going on. The other considerations is having our expectations up front. So if our schools haven't already decided what our expectations are for virtual settings like Zoom or anything like that, you might want to consider aligning those first and then having those reminded up front of these are expectations, especially things like language in the chat box or language if you're using microphones that way. Identifying how we're going to pass the talking piece. So I said, you know, if we're doing the chat box, you don't necessarily have to do that. But if you are going to do the microphone setting up front, how we're going to be passing who talks next. If you want to have a virtual talking piece, so if you always use like a specific stuffed animal in the classroom and the teacher still has the stuffed animal, then they can say, here's the stuffed animal, I'm passing it to Heidi. And then Heidi can say, okay, I have it now, I'm passing it to Stephanie virtually. Letting people know that they can pass still if they want. And if they're going to pass and you're using the chat box, have them just type pass so you know that they're passing, so you don't call on them. Remembering what is the purpose. Circles have three main purposes for prevention, which is community, problem solving, and teaching. I would highly recommend that right now, just really focusing on the community building piece and that social connection. Starting with more surface level questions, and I know some of the questions I showed you from the other district were more in depth, things like what are some needs you have at your house right now? Some of our kids may not be willing to start with that. So getting them comfortable with just basic surface level things like, what's something good that happened today? Or what's something fun that you've seen on TV? So surface level, and then as they get more comfortable with doing this online, you can go into some of those deeper questions first. I would say before you go do this live with students or even a large group of staff, practice with a couple people to get familiar with the different technology that are going to be used. And then some of us are very overwhelmed right now. So if you're going to ask some of our staff to do some circles online, virtually, I would give them some sample lessons to start with, just to get them more comfortable with it that way. So I'm going to go through real quick some examples of some different parts of the circle that can be done virtually. And we've also developed some, because we got a request for how can families do some family circles at home. So here's also some ideas for this as well. Okay, so here's some examples of greetings that can be done. And I think these could be done at home, but they could also be done online too. One of my favorites ones, if you could have anything for lunch right now, what would you want? If you could go anywhere, where would you want to go? I think I know my son has already made his list of where he wants to go when this is done and over. And we're not too far from Disney World, and that's one of his top things he wants to do. So yeah, he's kind of upset. So those are some of the ones that we can do, some focusing moments for home circles. different ones here too. I say take advantage of things like YouTube right now, because they do have some great music that you can show, or Go Noodle, get the kids up and doing some of these things. But what's also nice is we can talk with them about how they can use these strategies that we're doing here at home too. So if we're doing the visualizing your happy place, letting them know that if they get stressed out, they can do that during that time. If they're frustrated with something related to work and they don't know how to do it, they can do the first one, which is closing their eyes, taking a deep breath, and counting to 5. So some different examples for that. Feeling check-ins. Feeling check-ins, there's so many different ways. I really say the 1, 2, 3 is a good one. Finding out how kids are feeling about being at home. Zoom does have a feature, and I decided not to use it today, where I could turn this into a poll. And what's nice about this, it's anonymous, so I can kind of get a general sense of where my kids are, especially if they're not feeling comfortable being honest about that. I know a lot of the other platforms have that feature as well. So you can do this kind of feelings check-in. You can give them a feeling chart and post it on there. So I'm gonna stop sharing for 1 second. This is just a sample one I pulled from offline. Don't know if you guys can see it, but you could put one of these on there and ask the kids just to identify. Again, this is for our younger students. For some of our older students, it could be just lists of words. We have a work group here in the state of Florida that we do restorative practices monthly meetings, and we always start with a circle. And so even though we're adults, she has a feeling list word. And with her feeling list word, she's got all your main things like happy, sad, glad, and then alternate words in there as well. This would be another way, in lieu of that Google form, that if you're noticing a student who's having low feelings for check-ins, like this one here, or they're consistently saying things like they're scared, or they're upset, or they're sad, that would be another instance where, wow, I've noticed Helen has been feeling sad a lot recently. Maybe I need to make some connections with her to our social worker. Then we brainstormed a bunch of different examples for using circles at home. Again, I really want to emphasize the community building place first, but once you get comfortable with it, the students are comfortable with it, then maybe you can do some of these others. We have heard of some teachers still having the students at a set time coming in at elementary school and doing morning circles still. So they're setting up a Zoom maybe Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 8:30, and we're just going to do a morning circle. Some of the other ones that we could do just to kind of have fun is you could do rock, paper, scissors, and you could do it in the video chat way. And even if you don't have a microphone, you can do rock, paper, scissors. We practiced one the other day, which was 2 truths and a lie. So everybody identifies 2 truths and 1 lie, and then the class has to guess which one is the lie. Discussing things you and your family can do while you're at home. Be creative. So maybe kids can share some things that they've done while they're at home, or maybe you as an adult could share and then ask them or challenge them to do one of those things. And the next time you guys come back to share back one of the fun things that they've done at home. Another fun one, which I did with my son and his friends, which you could do virtually too, is something called I Can Find It. And so you tell them, especially for younger kids, like if you're practicing numbers or letters or sounds, I want you to find something that starts with the letter F, go. And then the kids have to run around their house and then come back with the item that starts with the letter F. Just kind of fun little things to get them around. Again, you could try some problem solving things. So maybe even for our older students, what could we do if we don't understand something? How do we get assistance? How do we get help? Or what do we do if our technology is not working? How do we problem solve those type things? So there's some different problem solving you could do as well. I always suggest starting with those community building ones. And then again, some examples of closing that you could do online. I think a good one would be reviewing what the assigned work is for online for the students so they understand, and especially if there's a specific order of things that should be done. I know with my sons, every week it's been a little bit different the way they've had it structured. So reviewing that would be very helpful, like on a Monday morning, letting them know if there's anything different. If you started with a focusing moment, like closing your eyes, if you did a yoga pose, if you did your visualization of a happy place, that might be something to close out with. If you do have a school song, chant, or pledge, maybe doing something like that to make that connection for the students back to their school would be a nice thing as well. So here's just a couple of those. So what we did was we developed for our schools here in Florida some sample lessons. So here's just a couple, here's just two of them. So this was one that we could be done virtually with the students, starting with I'm going on a picnic. They have to identify something they're bringing on their picnic that starts with their letter. So I'm Stephanie, and I'm going to bring sandwiches on our picnic. Heidi, if we're going on a picnic, what would you bring? Give her a second to think.
Put me on the spot with an H.
Yeah.
I will bring ho-hos.
She'll bring ho-hos.
Something really not good for us right now to eat.
Stephanie, what would you bring if you were going on a picnic?
I'm going to bring strawberries.
Ooh. Helen, if we were going on a picnic, what's one thing you would bring? Oops. I'm going to unmute her. Oops, it won't unmute.
Okay, hot dogs.
Hot dogs, great. Dee Dee, what would you bring?
I would bring Dunkin' iced coffee.
That sounds so good. Stacy, what would you bring?
Snickerdoodles.
Ooh, those are some of my favorite cookies. Michelle, what would you bring?
Michelle may have stepped away from her computer at this time.
Yeah, but it looks like it. Yeah. Amanda, what would you bring?
I'm going to bring apples.
Ooh. Laura, what would you bring?
I had to figure out how to unmute myself. I would bring, are we doing just food?
It doesn't matter. It starts with an L. What would you bring to a picnic?
Oh, starts with an M?
L for your
L.
name. Laura. Yeah.
Oh, lemonade.
Yum. I don't know. Janine, if you're there, what would you bring?
I'll bring some jelly beans.
Ooh, and Nicole, are you still there?
I am. I'll bring napkins.
Oh, that's something we probably need. Okay, did I get everybody? I think I did. And so how I did that circle by passing it is I used the pictures at top. So you can see there's some definite pluses and minuses to using the microphone. Okay, so I did that one. I'm going to go back and share again. So we practiced that greeting, and then you do the feeling check-in. I really like the 1, 2, and 3 because it's really quick and easy. And then we could play the activity game, 2 truths and a lie. So all students, and I would give them some wait time here to write down their 2 truths and a lie about themselves. What would be great is if you do have access and everybody has access to a microphone, doing 1 student at a time to give the opportunity and unmute them. Let them share, and then you could have a poll set up, 1, 2, 3, and you could pull up the poll and students could vote that way if you wanted. Or you could do it an old-fashioned hold up your fingers if you think 1 is the truth or the lie, if you think 2 is the lie, or if you think 3 is the lie. And then the students guess, and then they can share which was the truth and which was the lie, and then you could go over. And then a closing would be reviewing what the assigned work is for the day. So giving some of our staff, if we wanted to start with virtual circles, some ideas, some different samples like this to think about. I do have a school, not necessarily restorative practices, but they have one of the PBIS team members where once a week she is now identifying a fun thing to do for the week based around different things. So 2 weeks ago, it was National Unicorn Day. So she came up with some ideas and activities around unicorns and gave it to them. This week is Superhero Week. So, but you could do the same thing with circles, like here's some circles to try this week. And then this is one that we provided because we do have some families who are looking for some, what they're calling family meetings that they could do, some different activities. So here we did a focusing moment, just playing some background noise for calming, doing a feelings check-in upside and down, an activity, identify one thing that you can do around the house to help out. I know that would be nice. And then a closing, reviewing what is the assigned schoolwork, next activity schedule for the day. So if you did that as a morning family meeting. So giving some ideas for families, and I know that a lot of school districts are doing weekly newsletters for families about different activities and things, and then this could be something that could be put in there for families if they wanted to try. So just a couple resources I wanted to point out. We, for Florida, have done 2 YouTube videos to help out our schools. The first one is the community building relationships through restorative practices. It's a virtual chat kind of recording type thing, but it's got examples in it for both schools, but also for home. And then the last one is that we did have some requests from some of our school districts about doing family meetings, but for older students, like tweens and teens. And so that one is geared for families, and it's using the 4 parts of a circle, but geared towards older students. I think sometimes it's a little bit harder for our families to think about doing this with older kids. It's a little bit easier with our younger students. So those are some of the topics Heidi had sent that people had questions about. And I tried to be very purposeful today. I don't know about you, but as a parent and educator, I've been thrown so many different resources and ideas. It's been very overwhelming to us. So I just wanted to give you a couple things to consider and try. Now that you're doing things virtually, I think I was going to bring up what to do when schools do open back up, but I think we've already talked a little bit about that. So we do have a couple minutes, and I just wanted to open up now to see what other questions that you had or resources or things that you need. And if you don't have any, that's okay too. You can either put them in the chat box or you can unmute yourself if you want and ask that way as well.
Stephanie, I do have a question about when schools reopen. I guess my question is, what advice would you give maybe to if schools aren't already using these practices? And then this would be, like, I think we all were agreeing, this would be a great way for that reintegration back to schools, just even to rebuild that community and set that up. Are there any suggestions you would have if they've not been engaged in this practice already?
I would say if they don't already engage in this and they don't have the 4 steps, or they don't know the 4 steps of the circles, even just the middle thing of community building activities. So taking some time to do things like 2 truths and a lie, doing a fun like meetup, like small group meetups where they do rock, paper, scissors, and they pair up and then they go to the next person. I've seen it where they do like a whole bracket competition type thing. For some of our older students, doing things like just socializing with them, having time to spend with their peers because they haven't had that. One of the schools was sharing with us to try to get some of that social, and they do lunch hours. And so the teacher will say between 11 to 11:45, here's my Zoom room. I'm going to be eating my lunch. If you want to eat lunch with me, bring your lunch. We'll just have a conversation to try and keep some of that going. So I think if they're not doing restorative practices, even if they can do that community building piece of it, and you can Google community building activities and you can get a slew of them. But I would say just even starting there with the kids. for those that haven't been doing this, just to build that community back. What else? Any other questions? I'm taking that as a no. The PowerPoint, yeah. What I will do is, because we did record this, Stacy, I will put the PowerPoint from today in with that recording, and I'll send it through Google Drive to, actually I can send that PowerPoint to Heidi, but I'll also put it in the Google Drive, Heidi, with the recording, and you can send that out to everybody.
This was so helpful, and it's really getting us to think about how we're going to change what we're doing and helping teachers change kind of to evolve with the current situation. I think this was really awesome information. Thank you so much, Stephanie. It was really, really.
Well, I will send all those resources. Even if you just pick one of the things to do to start with, I would encourage that. There's so many ways that you can go. You could do those formal check-ins. You could start with circles, whatever is going to be helpful to continue to make the connections with the kids to make it easier. But I also want to emphasize with our staff and adults as well, because I think they need it just as much as our kids do. I see some heads nodding. Yeah. Okay.
And Stephanie, hopefully we'll stay in contact. Well, we will stay in contact with you as things evolve, and I'll have Janine and I can talk about, in the future if there's further support that we might require. Okay. I'd like to keep the conversation going because this has been really excellent, and I think today's been, in addition to the training, today's been really extremely helpful. So thank you again for giving us your knowledge and your insight, especially at such a critical time in education. We really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. And if we develop any more project resources for our state, I'll pass them to Heidi. And if you just want to pass them on, and feel free to use them because they're free for anybody. Well, if no one has any questions, Laura said we've been having team meetings on Wednesdays, kids wanting more hangout with teachers. I think some of the suggestions will make them more comfortable doing so and trying out. Yeah, I think some of our kids are still keeping touch with a couple of their friends. We've discovered there's a new kids messenger on Facebook, so my son's been able to keep in touch with a few friends, but not everybody. And so some of our kids are going to be missing some of their friends that for whatever reason they can't keep in touch with them. So having options like that might be helpful. Thank you, Laura. So it's 9:52. I don't want to keep you any longer. I know you guys have things to do. It's a Monday morning. I will send all this stuff to you, and I'll hang out for a couple minutes if anybody has any more questions. If not, if you're ready to move on, we'll see you next time. Thank you, Janine. Thank you, Heidi. Bye, Stacy.
This was really good, Stephanie. I just wanted to say thank you to you and Heidi for setting it up. And,
yeah.
You're just such a good mix of the research side of things, but practical application. I mean, I know looking at the Zoom list and using that as a way to pass to the next person. We're all as consultants with switching our PDs. Mm-hmm. The online format, similar to teachers, switching to their lessons. So I think we're all kind of circling now your strategies and how to build that into our format as well. It's a different challenge getting to know an audience of participants, similar to a new classroom, like how to start that relationship when you people before. And so selfishly, I was sitting here thinking, like, what can I share with my districts about using this with students, but also being able to apply it to ourselves. So say thank you.
We've done some training recently online, which is different for us too. And I think one of the things we start with every time now is just a greeting whether we do a full circle or not of greetings, because like you said, there's new people there that you may not know. And so by doing that greeting, we get to know people a little bit more. We've been trying to, just as a PD side, use the chat box a lot to keep people engaged. And if you haven't, and you've got large groups, if you haven't tried the breakout feature yet, that has been a good one. And then within that, what we've done is we've pinpointed one person who is the lead in that breakout. That really helped with us, because it's like, go do it, and then we want them to report back. So we've identified who the lead is, and then that person's the one that report back. And then we tell them we're going to pop into the room. So then we pop around so we know that they're on task.
So you guys, you're using Zoom mostly as the platform?
We do, because that's what we had already purchased beforehand. One of the things that before this whole Zoom booming started to occur, the day before that like started hitting the national airwaves, we actually experienced it. It was bad. It was really, really ugly. And then Zoom started putting some security features in place. And so that's why I had Heidi email me everybody's name, and everybody's in the waiting room, and your name has to match in order for you to come in.
We had the same thing. We had 80 people on a call with our special ed directors, and we got bombed. It was bad. It was really bad. Yeah.
It started with some inappropriate visuals, which we were kind of like, what's going on? And then when they realized they were getting away with that, then the comments started in the chat box, which was really bad. And it was with a TA chat, so it was with like families and district people. So it was
yikes.
So
Yikes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good luck, ladies.
All right. Well, you take care and you stay strong, and we'll survive this pandemic. All of us will. We will.
Yeah. We got the announcement over the weekend that we're closed until next year.
Yeah. We haven't gotten it yet, but we're anticipating that's what's going to happen. Yeah. I'm thinking probably this week we'll probably get it from the governor.
Yeah.
I wanted to share real quick, Stephanie, just to let you know. It's not work related, but I've been doing a small group with 7th grade girls from my church. Like I'm a leader, and we've been doing it virtual like this. And so many things you shared are what we're doing. And interesting, last night we were asking about how has it changed the way you're connecting with people. And a couple girls shared they're actually going deeper with their friends than they ever have in this format. And so they're sharing more and getting to know each other more than they do face to face. So I just wanted to share that.
That's cool.
That's really cool, right? You know, so I thought that was really a good connection for them, a good takeaway.
Yeah.
That's true. You can be vulnerable in a different way when a screen's you almost.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So thanks for everything. I'm applying it personally and professionally. So thank you.
We've been doing a lot of that too. So we've been using Zoom a lot to connect with family and friends, and other things, because I think we need that as well as our kids do. So,
but a lot of your tips are helpful, just to how do you keep the conversation going, and those are good tips. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again, and we'll be in contact.
Okay.
And I'll talk to Janine too. We'll have to, and our team will have to strategize as to what continued follow-up support, if that's okay with you.
Okay, no, that's fine. Yeah.
From you that we might require.
Okay. Sounds good. Have a happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Bye, Stephanie. Bye, friends.
Bye. Do you want me to send a link, Steph? Okay, I'll send a link to everybody. All right. See you guys.
Bye.